In the beginning, Iga was wandering around while thinking that it was over, wondering why she was cold only toward him. Then someone called out to him, apologizing before asking him to help with the homework. Iga agreed and asked what needed explaining. The other student praised him, calling him a god, before pointing out the section he did not understand. Iga explained that it was easy if the formula was applied correctly. While watching him, the student remarked that, as expected of Iga, he was handsome, smart, caring, and even the heir to a major company, the perfect human being. Iga replied that flattery would not make him help with future homework. The student then commented that if Iga ever got a girlfriend, every guy in school would become his enemy. After that, he seriously asked why Iga did not already have a girlfriend. Iga awkwardly replied that it was because he had already decided on someone. The student immediately guessed it was Sotome-san. Surprised, Iga asked how he figured it out. The student pointed out that Sotome-san was only cold toward Iga and seemed to avoid him. Iga tried to downplay it, saying she was only avoiding him a little. But the student bluntly replied that it was basically the same thing, and that Iga's chances did not seem very high. Those words left Iga speechless for a moment, before he complained about hearing that from someone he had just helped study. The student quickly apologized and told him to do his best. Iga then thought that even if he tried his hardest, there was still another problem he needed to deal with first. At that moment, he noticed that she was watering the plants again today. Nearby, Sotome gently watered the flowers, while encouraging them to grow up healthy and strong. Watching her, Iga thought about how kind she was even to plants, which only made him love her more. Then one of her friends approached and asked what she was doing. She casually answered that she was watering the plants. Iga continued thinking that Himika-chan was friendly and kind to everyone, and that he was probably the only person she treated coldly. His thoughts spiraled as he wondered if he ranked even lower than the plants in her eyes, questioning whether he was the lowest-ranking human to her, and somehow less appealing than flowers. Both girls then noticed Iga silently panicking by himself. Confused, Himika asked what he was doing over there. Her friend jokingly wondered if he had gone crazy from studying too much. Himika then quietly wondered if she had somehow made Iga-kun poorly. Her friend immediately asked if she was interested in him. Himika hesitated before responding. Her friend pointed out that she was always sneaking glances at Iga-kun. Trying to change the subject, Himika suddenly brought up the drama from yesterday and excitedly talked about how her heart was pounding while watching it. She added that the protagonist's childhood friend was manly and cool, the ideal type every girl admired. Hearing that conversation, Iga realized that the trait she liked was manliness. Later, after returning home, he found Maria standing there silently. Out of nowhere, he declared that he wanted to refine his charm as a human being and asked Maria to cooperate with him and help him. Maria immediately refused. Confused, he asked why. She calmly explained that it was beyond the scope of her duties and that she had been instructed not to become too personally involved. Iga let out a quiet sigh and remarked that he thought even Maria had started becoming cold toward him as well. Then he sincerely told her that she always handled her work perfectly and that he trusted and respected her, not only as a maid, but also as a person. Iga then concluded that their difference in social status was probably the real issue. Maria immediately denied it. Iga could only comment that she was tough. Maria reminded him that he was the next heir and asked him to stop with the pointless sophistry. However, after a brief pause, she admitted that if it was part of taking care of him as her master, she might cooperate a little. Hearing that, Iga happily called out her name. After that, he asked the important question, what exactly counted as manliness? Maria answered that it meant having the courage to remain calm in any situation. Iga agreed and immediately declared that he wanted her help with courage training. Maria looked surprised. Iga then revealed his plan, a horror movie. According to him, having the mental strength to endure fear without flinching was the definition of being manly. Maria simply replied that she understood, though internally she thought it was a ridiculous idea. Still, Iga insisted that she watch it together with him. Maria reluctantly agreed, and the two began watching the movie. As it played, Iga noticed how calm she seemed and pointed out that she looked completely unfazed. Maria remained silent. Meanwhile, Iga internally braced himself, thinking that this training would be brutal because he was terrible with horror movies, especially sudden jump scares. Right after that thought, a jump scare appeared on screen, causing him to flinch violently. Internally, he panicked, thinking that this might actually be impossible since he had nearly screamed. He then convinced himself that if he kept acting pathetic, not only Himikawa-san, but even Maria would start looking down on him. As her master, preserving his dignity was the one thing he absolutely could not allow. Trying to calm himself down, Ige came up with a plan. If he simply closed his eyes, then it would not be scary. As long as he did not see the zombies, he could endure it. He even tried imagining the screams as Himikawa's voice, thinking that would actually sound cute. And so he kept his eyes shut while listening to the movie until the very end. But suddenly Himikawa herself appeared before him, telling him to keep his eyes open. Startled, Ige screamed out her name in shock. Himikawa then told him that running away from the screen was not manly, and that she liked the more manly version of Ige-kun. Hearing that Ige internally exploded with motivation. She liked him. Now he finally understood. This was all training, and there was no point in doing it if he kept his eyes closed. He decided that he would become manlier and grow closer to Himikawa-san. Meanwhile, Maria suddenly remembered that Ige-sama was terrible with horror movies. When she looked over at him, she realized he was on the verge of passing out. Delirious, Ige muttered that a toothless zombie was biting him. Maria dryly replied that it just sounded like a neighbor before immediately telling him to pull himself together. But Ige was already fading in and out of consciousness. As Maria's voice grew distant, he wondered if the voice he was hearing belonged to Himikawa. In reality, Maria was desperately calling for Ige-sama to wake up. A moment later, Ige finally regained consciousness in confusion. Relieved, Maria told him she was glad he had woken up. Ige apologized after realizing he had passed out, and said sorry for causing trouble. Maria calmly assured him that it was fine. She admitted that overcoming fear was admirable, but not to the extent that he pushed himself until he fainted. Ige quietly agreed. Maria then firmly warned him that this should never happen again. Ige apologized once more. Even then he could not stop thinking about the voice he had heard earlier. In his mind it had sounded like Himikawa's voice, though he knew she would never actually take care of him like that. After a short pause, Maria asked why he had suddenly decided to start this training in the first place. Ige honestly answered that he simply wanted to become a little closer to his crush's ideal type. The moment she heard that, Maria froze in shock and accidentally dropped the plate she was holding. Confused, Ige called out her name. Maria quickly apologized and said she would return to work now. Before Ige could stop her, she had already left. Left alone, he could only stare after her and wonder if she had really just walked away. The scene then shifted to Maria in her room, removing her uniform, while quietly reflecting that she had left despite having no work remaining. She then admitted to herself that Ige-sama truly did have someone he liked. The next day after school, Ige walked home alone, while thinking about how he had not gotten the chance to talk to Himikawa that day. While walking, he suddenly spotted Himikawa with another guy nearby. Immediately, Ige realized she was being hit on. He wanted to help her, but the man approaching her looked intimidating, and fear rooted his legs to the ground. The guy casually insisted that it was only karaoke before suddenly grabbing Himikawa's hand. Startled, Himikawa loudly refused. At that moment, Ige finally forced himself forward. He questioned why he was hesitating when all the training from yesterday had been for moments exactly like this, to protect Himikawa like a real man. Gathering his courage, Ige stepped between them and declared that the girl in front of him was his girlfriend. Everyone froze in shock. Himikawa quietly called out Ige-kun's name in surprise. The guy looked confused and repeated the word, girlfriend. Ige firmly confirmed it. Even while standing there, Ige internally admitted that he was terrified, but he refused to back down. The man quickly relaxed and said Ige should have mentioned it sooner. He then casually patted Ige on the shoulder and explained that if she already had a boyfriend, then he would not continue hitting on her because he considered himself a proper guy. Internally, Ige could only think that a proper guy would not have hit on her in the first place. The man then left while wishing them happiness together. Ige awkwardly replied before turning back toward Himikawa. Concerned, he immediately asked whether she was hurt. Himikawa quietly answered that she was fine. The moment he confirmed she was safe, Ige suddenly dropped to his knees and frantically apologized for calling her his girlfriend without permission. Even if it was only to drive the guy away, he felt he had gone too far. Himikawa reassured him that it was okay and thanked him for helping her. Then she stepped closer and shyly admitted that Ige-kun had looked manly and cool just now. Hearing those words, Ige froze in shock before instinctively grabbing her hand and asking if he could at least get her contact information. Himikawa immediately turned bright red in embarrassment. Blushing just as hard himself, Ige hurriedly added, that even her social media account would be fine. But the next second, Himikawa suddenly ran away while loudly refusing. Completely devastated, Eiga shouted in confusion, asking why. He then collapsed to the ground, wondering how he could still be treated so coldly even after becoming manlier. In despair, he questioned whether love had always been this difficult. The scene then shifted to Himikawa herself, blushing intensely while remembering how cool Eiga had looked earlier. In her mind, his words echoed repeatedly. "Don't touch my girlfriend." Flustered, she buried her face in embarrassment and admitted that he had really said that. To her, he had looked far too perfect, and deep down she desperately wished he would truly make her his girlfriend someday. But after a moment she let out a hopeless sigh and muttered that it would never happen. Then she quietly removed her wig. At that moment, the truth was revealed. Sotome Himikawa and the Koju family's maid, Maria, were the same person. By order of the Koju family head, Maria disguised herself as Himikawa and attended school as Ige's classmate in order to monitor whether he behaved appropriately as the future heir of the family. To avoid exposing her identity, she intentionally kept her distance from him at school. Even inside the mansion, she was not allowed to interact with him beyond her role as a maid. Thinking about him, Maria reflected on how kind Eiga-sama always was. Despite everything, he genuinely tried to connect with both Himikawa and Maria alike. However, the family head constantly reminded Eiga that he should only associate with people truly worthy of standing beside the future heir. If Maria grew too close to him, the family head's opinion of EJ would undoubtedly worsen. Because of that, Maria believed she absolutely could not risk damaging Ige-sama's future. That was why she had to keep her feelings hidden. Even so, she honestly admitted to herself that pretending to be cold toward the person she liked was exhausting. She repeatedly shook her head, insisting that she did not want things to stay this way. At the same time, she feared that if she continued pushing him away, Ige-sama might eventually come to hate her. Left alone with her emotions, Maria quietly confessed to herself that she truly wanted to grow closer to Ige-sama. The scene then shifts and the teacher announces that next week will be cooking practice and that the groups for the activity would be decided by lottery that day. One of the girls says that she hopes to end up in the same group as Iga-kun, while another remarks that he does not seem interested in group assignments. As Iga quietly thinks to himself, the girls continue, saying that he is not making a fuss like the other boys and probably does not think much about cooking practice with girls. However, Iga internally denies that assumption. He hopes to end up in the same group as Himikawa-san, thinking that cooking together with someone you like is practically like being newlyweds. When the results are announced, Iga becomes excited after finding out that he and Himikawa-san are in the same group. But then Himikawa stands up and tells the teacher that she wants to change groups. Iga immediately begins overthinking the situation, wondering if she had deliberately looked at him while making the request. The scene shifts again, and Iga reflects on how the groups ultimately did not change, yet Himikawa-san's cold attitude remained exactly the same. He wonders if she dislikes him so much that even being in the same group is unpleasant for her, and resolves to somehow increase his favorability during cooking practice. Downstairs, Himikawa's friend wonders aloud whether showing off her cooking skills could improve someone's opinion of her, before admitting that she has never even used a kitchen knife before. Himikawa then suggests starting practice immediately and comments that people who are good at cooking are truly admirable. After overhearing this, Iga quietly understands the implication and internally vows that he will become Himikawa-san's professional chef. The scene then shifts to Iga back at home, wearing an apron as he calls out to Maria and declares that, starting today, she should refer to him as head chef. Maria remains silent for a moment before asking what exactly he is trying to do this time. Iga explains that he wants to rehearse for cooking practice. Internally, he thinks that becoming someone capable of cooking would raise his favorability, especially since men these days also need to know how to cook. Standing behind him, Maria simply responds in agreement. At the same time, Maria reflects on how unexpected it is that they ended up in the same group. She reminds herself that she carries a secret that must never be discovered by Iga-sama. By order of the head of the family, she monitors his school life during the day under the identity of Satomi Himikawa, while after school, she works as the Kujo family's maid, Maria. As Himikawa, she has been trying to maintain distance from Iga-sama, so she knows she must be especially careful not to get too close during cooking practice. Maria then asks whether he has any cooking experience. Iga honestly answers that he does not. Despite that, he confidently declares that she should just watch closely because he is about to make Maria a delicious curry. Maria questions where all that confidence is coming from. Ignoring the concern, Iga announces that they should begin cooking. The scene shifts again as Iga starts preparing the curry, while internally convincing himself that it is not a difficult dish. According to the instructions, all he has to do is cut the ingredients, sauté them, add water, let everything simmer, and finally, add the roux. But from behind him, Maria suddenly questions where the mysterious dark matter in the pot came from during that process. Ige insists that although it looks terrible, it probably tastes fine, and immediately takes a bite. The moment he does, he throws up. Alarmed, Maria screams out Ige's name in concern. Meanwhile, Ige weakly remarks that his entire body is losing sensation and consciousness, wondering if those are the effects of anesthesia. Maria becomes deeply concerned, thinking that at this rate, cooking practice will turn into a disaster. Determined to fix the situation, she tells him that she will train him relentlessly until next week. Ige gratefully thanks her. Maria then points out that beginners should not experiment with strange additions. Ige innocently asks whether secret ingredients like kushia or durian would work. Maria immediately rejects the idea and further points out that he is not even holding the knife properly in the first place. As she teaches him, Maria suddenly becomes aware of how intimate the situation feels and internally wonders if they look like a couple flirting together in the kitchen. She almost continues the thought, calling it delicate, but quickly stops herself and panics internally, realizing that if the other servants were to see them like this, they would completely misunderstand the situation. At the same time, Ige also becomes conscious of how close they are. Although he appreciates her guidance, he cannot help noticing Maria's breath against his neck and how good she smells. "It's too stimulating for me," Ige says before suddenly screaming. Startled by his reaction, Maria becomes frightened, and the two of them quickly distance themselves from each other. Maria immediately warns him not to fling the knife around. Ige apologizes, explaining that he is simply a little nervous. At the same time, both of them internally admit that their hearts are racing for entirely different reasons. After calming down, Maria asks if they should continue, and Ige agrees. The two resume cooking together, while Ige internally reflects that, with Maria's guidance, the lesson proceeds smoothly after that. Eventually, Ige proudly declares that he somehow managed to finish. Maria responds that, somehow is indeed the correct word, adding that she never expected Ige-sama to be this terrible at cooking. Grateful for her help, Ige grabs Maria's hand and thanks her sincerely, saying that thanks to her, next week's cooking practice should go perfectly. Maria points out that it has already gotten late, though she still admits to being a little worried. The scene then shifts to the following day at school. As Himikawa watches the preparations, she quietly thinks that they have certainly come a long way compared to the dark matter incident. Both Ige and Himikawa stand together as the teacher announces that it is finally time to begin cooking. The two answer in unison. Ige excitedly thinks to himself that the long-awaited day has finally arrived, and that today he will show Himikawa-san his cool side. Confidently, he declares that he will handle the vegetables. Meanwhile, both Himikawa and her friend silently worry about whether things will really be all right. Standing beside him, Himikawa carefully watches over Ige, thinking that she needs to prevent any injuries or foreign objects from ending up in the food. As she notices the cuts covering his hands, she realizes that he must have continued practicing on his own afterward. Despite being busy with lessons and family studies, he became this serious over a single cooking practice. She quietly reflects that Ige-sama has always been that kind of earnest person, and that sincerity is exactly what attracted her to him in the first place. Suddenly, Ige proudly calls out that he has finished cutting the vegetables. Himikawa looks visibly surprised. Ige then excitedly points out the carrots, claiming that this is the most confident piece of knife work he has done so far. Himikawa stares at him in shock, before internally admitting that his work is surprisingly perfect. She even thinks that if it were not for her monitoring duties, she would already be praising him enthusiastically. Quickly restraining herself, she reminds herself to stay composed. Out loud, she simply comments that it is decent work for him. However, after moving away, she regrets acting so coldly toward him again. At the same time, she notices how much harder Ige-sama seems to be trying lately, and begins wondering if perhaps she herself wanted to become a little closer to him. That thought reminds her of the time Ige once said that he wanted to become a little closer to his ideal crush. Himikawa then quietly asks whether he practiced cooking until he injured himself. Hearing that, Ige becomes visibly surprised. She then asks if he went this far because there is someone he likes. Flustered, Ige immediately denies it. Watching his reaction, Himikawa internally concludes that he is terrible at lying. Trying to recover, Ige awkwardly explains that it is simply self-improvement, and that there are people he wants to serve homemade meals to. Hearing that, Himikawa sadly thinks that no matter how much she helps him train, Ige-sama will still only have eyes for the person he truly likes. She also reflects on how she herself merely wishes to become a maid worthy of always supporting him. However, she is suddenly caught off guard when Iga continues explaining that he has always been clumsy and constantly relies on that person. Since he cannot repay her in any other way, he wants to express his gratitude through cooking. At that moment, Himikawa finally realizes what he meant before. She remembers the time Iga confidently declared that he would make Maria delicious curry. Realizing the truth, Himikawa internally understands that he really has been paying attention to her as well. But before she can process those feelings completely, Iga suddenly blurts out that today's curry is meant for Himikawa to eat. Immediately afterward, Himikawa abruptly apologizes and announces that she will be leaving early because she is not feeling well. Hearing that, Iga panics in shock. Internally, he laments all the effort he put into training over the past few days and his entire strategy to raise her favorability toward him. The scene then shifts outside the classroom, where Himikawa struggles to calm herself down. She repeatedly tells herself that she cannot do anything for him, and that there is no way his feelings could truly mean what she hopes they do. After all, a maid is supposed to devote herself entirely to her master. Yet despite trying to deny her emotions, she finally calls him an idiot before quietly admitting that she loves him. Removing her wig, she softly repeats that he truly is an idiot, even though simply receiving feelings as wonderful as his should have already been enough for her.